Yes, good evening, church. Good evening, Pastor. Shekinah Church, I thought we was going to be outside, so Hamilton Parish, family and friends, those who flew from Southampton, Sentinel Hill. She knows who I'm talking to. But it's indeed a pleasure to be standing here tonight in front of you. Pastor, as I echo Deaconess Vaughn's or Deaconess in Training, I do hold it a privilege. Thank you. If you told me that about a year ago I'd be doing this, I'd say you're definitely crazy. Or you can take your seats also. And then when Pastor told me I'd be doing this, I was like, I wonder if I could have a quick last-minute trip or blame it on my continuing throat problem that I tell you praise to my head all the time. But I thought to myself, if God is for it, then who am I to be against it? So here we go. I'm going to go from a familiar text of St. Luke 13, verses 10 to 17. And I'll focus on verses 11 and 12. You can just let me know when you have it. I guess you do. Here begins the reading of God's holy word. And behold, there was a woman which had a spirit of infirmity 18 years, and was bowed together, and could in no wise lift herself up. And when Jesus saw her, he called her and said unto her, Woman, thou art loosed from thine infirmity. The topic of this text is I can't stay like this. So let's get to it. I'm sure we all remember back when we were young in our childhood, we had that one person in class who was a little different, ate glue, had bad hygiene, had a bad haircut, or in my case, I was the 8-year-old that came to school wearing glasses, and not just the regular fancy glasses, they had that thick Coke bottles. That was me. And childhood can be kind of cruel sometimes. But we all have those challenges when it comes to making real changes in our lives. That's why those New Year's resolutions are usually abandoned by about February, March, if you make it that far. But there's a quote by an unknown author that I found that says, your desire to change has to be greater than your desire to stay the same. You have to be like the songwriter says, and it's actually one of my favorite songs, as the deer panteth for the water, so my soul longeth after thee. You have to cry out sometimes for real change to take place. It can't just always be mamby-pamby. You have to really go in and go all for it. I just have a quick story. It's nothing too deep, but it's when I was in my last year in school out in Canada. I was taking one of my senior performance classes, and it was a piece I was given. I had a lot of self-study required for the class. And me being all of 21, of course, I knew everything there was to know. You couldn't tell me anything. I was like, I'm going to do this. I don't even need to go to the class. So when the professor told me, come in whenever you want, I came in never. Even though I kept messing up on the same point or the same part over and over and over, I just said I could just fluff my way through as I thought I could, but definitely couldn't. So I finally went to my professor to show him my progress, and he said words I will never forget. He said, you know you will make it through this piece without changing your hand position. It's difficult to switch, but that's what's required to make it through. So I had to go back to my basic instructions as a musician. And those of you who have taken piano or any sort of probably instrument, you've definitely heard your teacher tell you about posture, hand position, or at least my students hear it all the time. I don't crack anybody's knuckles, as I've heard some people do. But we as believers have some simple instructions too, and that is to take your issues directly to the source. We all hear that song, and we love that song. It actually is my favorite song, Total Praise, that he is the source of our strength and the strength of our life. He's the only person that can fix certain situations, or all situations, for that matter. God has the ability to correct our posture, both mentally and physically, just like he did for me in my piano class. So let's take a look at the text written about the woman who was bowed for 18 years and see how God straightened her entire life as we deal with the following 3 points: her twist, her treatment, and her triumph. And we begin. Her twist. Me being a numbers guy, I figured the number 18 had to have some sort of significance. So actually, as I was studying, the number 18 is very symbolic of bondage, or even the end of bondage in the Bible. In Judges chapter 3, verses 14 and 15, as well as chapter 10, verse 8, both accounts talk about Israel messing up in some way and being in bondage for 18 years until God appoints a judge to free them. The mental slavery that this woman in the Bible had to be dealing with surely had to be extreme. Consider the fact that she lost her ability to look up because she couldn't straighten herself up. Just imagine that. I couldn't imagine not looking up. Looking up is a sign of hope that things will get better eventually, even if it doesn't seem as if it will at the time. But after 18 years fighting this physical condition, surely her mental state must have become affected as well. They say the greatest battlefield is in the mind, and I'm sure this had to be playing on her mind at some point through these years. She probably got to a point where she had heard all the insults, tried all the treatments available, but she was relegated to looking down, possibly stuck in a continual state of hopelessness. I remember a time actually when I was in my teens and I was doing a lot of work, landscaping, construction, trucking. I think my parents should remember this because they took me to the hospital, so hopefully. One day I actually suffered a muscle spasm in my back, which only lasted a couple of hours, but honestly was by far the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. Those of you who have delivered children, I tip my hat to you because it wouldn't be anybody in here if that was on me. But God actually would not allow you to go through a test without having a testimony. That's the whole point of it. God puts you in situations where you can't rely on anybody, not your spouse, best friend, work colleague, siblings, doesn't make a difference. There's only one person who can actually deliver you from all these situations. Every setback is actually a setup for a comeback, and God wants to bring you out better than you were before. Now, I'm not sure if this woman in the Bible actually purposely went out looking for Jesus in the synagogue that day, or even if she had any idea what was awaiting for her, but surely she was ready and in need of something new. And on that day, she got number 2, her treatment. Just one touch from God changes everything. This woman probably went to the nearest pharmacy, or even she was in today's time, she was up watching all those infomercials that we see, calling those 1-800 numbers or searching Amazon and eBay, just waiting by her mailbox, waiting for that shipment to come in. But luckily for us as believers, we serve the master physician, whose resume speaks for itself. We've all heard of those 12-step programs to cure this and that, and I respect that totally. But really, with Jesus, all you need is that one step towards him, and you can watch him do the rest. See, a lot of times we actually, as Christians, get in our own way and try to play God in some situations, which only just delays our deliverance, when all you were required to do is just take that one step and really just get out of the way. Verse 13 says, he laid his hands on her, and immediately she was made straight and glorified God. Now, I found the word immediately very interesting. And when I looked it up, it actually came across some synonyms, here and now, in a flash, without delay or without hesitation. Now, I ask you, what drug have you ever taken that you can say gives not only instant results, but eternal results? No one but God can do that. Not the Advil, Tylenol, Bayer, nothing like that. See, we try a whole lot of things. It could be drugs, sex, violence, cursing to cover the hole that can only be filled by God. All those small G's cannot stand up to the big G. I say don't make God your last choice, but save yourself a whole lot of pain, time, and heartache, and make him your choice now, because as Christians, regardless of the situation we find ourselves in, God will always give us, number 3, a triumph. Verse 14 says, and the ruler of the synagogue answered with indignation, because that Jesus had healed on the Sabbath day, and said unto the people, there are 6 days in which men ought to work, and them therefore come and be healed, and not on the Sabbath day. Can you imagine somebody telling God to take a vacation? Like, who are you, sir? Like, sometimes we put religion over relationship, our own theory over the practicality, or our own head knowledge over the heart, which is certainly not how my God operates. The Cricket World Cup actually just concluded last weekend. Unfortunately, my team lost. Coming to that later. But as we know, for major tournaments, it takes plenty of time and energy to prepare. That's why the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat is all the more highlighted in these types of events. You can see, I even saw the game, you can see grown men and women crying unconsolably at wins or losses. Somewhere along the way, the journey gets tough, but we have to get like Gideon and just lace up our boots and go to work. And remember, the journey is not a sprint, but a marathon. Reminds me of that May 24th I had to run. That was a one-timer. But Psalm verse 5 says, you prepare a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. The word of God actually says we're going to have enemies. So don't get sidetracked by that, because if we faint not, we can rejoice for what God has done for us. We are all humans here, so of course it gets tough. but God has a way of allowing you to triumph in front of your enemies, just like Somerset is going to do in St. George's in a couple weeks. Sure. I like that red shirt too, Brother Candy. But that's a topic for another day. So if Pastor has me come back, I'll talk about that in a couple of weeks. God allows you to celebrate in front of those people who doubted you or even conspired against you. Those are the greatest victories, the ones that say, you know, that song, the heart of the battle, the sweet of the victory. So in conclusion, we all have heard that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Or we could bring it up to the millennial sister Chelsea. If he did it before, he could do it again. Same God right now, same God back then. All we have to do is trust him through the process as God brings us from our twisted state. And we all have had twisted states, not just with your back, but just in life, period. He'll take you from your twisted state, treat you in his own operating room, and give you the triumph at the end of the day. Thank you.